What if what if you could trace the DNA of people living today, like way back, over 25,000 years, connecting them directly to Ice Age hunter-gatherers in Europe?
That sounds pretty incredible.
Well, you can. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the really fascinating and honestly often surprising genetic story of Croatia.
Croatia, interesting.
Yeah. So our mission here is basically to navigate these layers of genetic info that researchers have found, pull out the most, impactful insights,
Ugh.
and understand why this specific genetic story is so unique. We'll try not to get too bogged down in the super technical details.
Good plan.
We're following the journey our sources outline. It takes us through ancient history, migrations, even some modern controversies, all through this lens of DNA.
And it's really striking, isn't it, how one place can have such deep ancient roots, but also be so genetically complex at the same time.
Exactly.
It's like a living testament to deep human history. We're essentially looking at a place that holds what scientists sometimes call living relics of Europe's prehistoric past.
Living relics.
Yeah, it lets us glimpse the genetics of people who were around long before, well, before any written records.
Okay, so let's start unpacking that. What's the first big piece of this genetic puzzle, the most significant marker pointing to that deep past? How common is it?
Right. Well, the really striking statistic that our sources point to is that over 45%, think about that, nearly half of Croatian men carry the I2A haplogroup.
I2A, okay.
Yeah, specifically a branch called subclade I2A1b. And that 45%, that's one of the highest frequencies anywhere in the world.
Wow.
And this I2A haplogroup, it's often nicknamed the Old European lineage. Its significance is, well, it's huge. It's been present right there in the Balkans since the last glacial maximum.
The Ice Age.
Pretty much, yeah, around 20,000 years ago. So this predates farming, writing, cities, everything we think of as early civilization.
That's incredible.
It really is. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, it suggests, that genetic continuity in some parts of Europe is way more resilient than maybe we thought. It sort of challenges that common idea of constant replacement through migration.
Right, like waves washing over everything.
Exactly. Much of the Croatian gene pool seems to have stayed remarkably stable, really rooted in that region, which is quite a contrast with, say, Western Europe, where you had those big successive waves of Celtic, Roman, Germanic migrations that really did reshape the genetic landscape quite dramatically.
That's a fascinating point about resilience. But okay, it's not all just ancient stability, is it?
No, definitely not.
You mentioned the interior tells the story of deep roots, but what about the coast? Croatia's got that amazing Dalmatian coast. Is it a different story there?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very different picture along the coast. That's where we see what our sources are calling ancient Adriatic DNA.
Adriatic DNA.
Yeah. Because of centuries and centuries of trade, conflict, empires coming and going, coastal Croats show this really interesting mix of genetic markers. You see E1B1B, which often pops up in Mediterranean populations, and also J2, which has origins traced back to the Near East.
So trade routes, interactions.
Exactly. And get this, some studies on the Dalmatian Islands found that up to 30% of male lineages traced back to Greek colonists from the 4th century BCE.
No way, 30% from ancient Greece.
Yep. So the Adriatic coast really is like a genetic palimpsest, layers upon layers. It shows how trade and war aren't just history book events. They actually shape our biology. It creates this sort of living Mediterranean mosaic right there in the DNA.
Okay, this mix, the ancient core and the coastal diversity, it leads to a really kind of provocative question, doesn't it? Are Croats Slavs, or are they something more complex? Because linguistically, they are Slavic. Croatian is a Slavic language. But genetically, as you've laid out, the roots seem much, much older than those Slavic migrations that happened around the 6th and 7th centuries.
Yeah.
So if the genetics are so ancient, why the Slavic language? That seems like a huge contradiction. How do we, unpack that?
That is precisely the core of a really significant and sometimes contentious historical debate.
I can imagine.
So one view held by quite a few historians is that the Slavic language was adopted by the people already living there, the pre-existing population, but without a massive genetic replacement event.
So the language changed, but the deep genetic ancestry mostly stayed.
That's the idea. Ancient DNA retained, cultural identity shifts now. There are also some, let's say, fringe researchers who've gone further. They've suggested that Slavic identity was kind of superimposed by ruling classes onto the existing population.
Okay, that sounds controversial.
It is. As you can guess, that claim has sparked some pretty heated discussions.
Mhm.
Linguists, geneticists, national historians, they all have different takes. It really forces us to question those neat categories we use for identity. Is it your DNA? Is it your language, your culture?
Right. Where do you draw the line?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Our sources show it's a complex interplay, and there are strong arguments, on various sides.
Okay, let's zoom in even more now. You mentioned the islands earlier. There's this other unique aspect called the island puzzle.
Ah, yeah.
Islands like Apefar, Broch, Korčula, they're pretty close geographically right off the coast.
Relatively close.
But the research shows they have extreme genetic drift because they were isolated for so long. What exactly does genetic drift mean for these island populations?
Well, the implications are actually quite profound. Genetic drift, basically it means that in small, isolated populations, gene frequencies can change randomly over time, just by chance.
Not necessarily through adaptation, just chance.
Right. So because these island communities were often founded by just a small group of people and then stayed isolated for centuries, some of these populations ended up with unusually high levels of certain rare genetic traits or even rare diseases. That's the founder effect.
Founder effect,
Yeah,
because the founders happen to have those genes.
precisely. Their specific genes become much more common than they would be in a larger, more mixed population. For instance, on Cordula, researchers found unique mutations in mitochondrial DNA.
That's the DNA passed down from the mother.
Correct. Mutations not seen anywhere else in Europe.
Wow.
So studying these Croatian islanders is actually super valuable for science. It helps researchers understand how genetics evolve in small isolated groups. It's like a real-life laboratory for evolutionary biology.
A natural lab. Okay, so we had the deep ancient core, the coastal mix, the isolated island puzzles. How remarkable is it then that despite, modern life, globalization, all the connections we have now, Croatia as a whole seems to have kept so much of this genetic uniqueness?
It really is remarkable, and several factors likely contribute. Geography is a big one.
The mountains and the sea.
Exactly. They act as natural barriers, limiting large-scale gene flow over long periods. And there's also been significant social continuity, particularly in rural areas, traditions, communities staying put, that helps maintain distinct genetic patterns across generations.
Makes sense.
And even today, modern genetic mapping projects, they consistently show Croatians forming a distinct genetic cluster within Europe. Genetically, they tend to cluster closer to, say, Bosnians and Slovenians than they do to Serbians or Hungarians.
Interesting. So that genetic data potentially opens up new ways of looking at regional history and politics, too.
For sure. It invites us to rethink some of those long-held narratives about regional identities and connections. It adds another layer to the story.
What an incredible journey we've taken, really. From the Ice Age through ancient empires, coastal trade, island isolation, right up to modern debates about identity, tracing this genetic story of Croatia. It's just such a powerful story of endurance, isn't it? Adaptation, this complex identity that's literally woven into the chromosomes, surviving through millennia.
It really is. And maybe that leads to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to consider. Given everything we've discussed, all these fascinating genetic layers, what do you think makes the Croatian gene pool so special? Does it make sense to think of Croatians as, in some way, representing the first Europeans? Or is that too simplistic?
That's a deep question.
And maybe even more fundamentally, what do you believe matters more in defining who we are? Is it our genetics? Or is it our culture, our language, our history?
Powerful questions to leave us with. Definitely something to reflect on. It really shows how these deep dives into what might seem like a specific topic can actually reshape how we think about history, identity, and just the incredibly intricate, sprawling story of human migration.